king who grew a horn on his head. Once upon a time, there was a wise old king. However, the older he grew, the uglier he became. And to make things worse, a pointed bone started growing on the top of his head. This bone was very much like one of the horns of a cow. The king was so mortified about this bone that he did not want anyone to find out. And to conceal his secret, the king began to wear a larger crown, one which completely covered the horn. Yet, there was one person who had to know about the king's horn. This was the barber, who every month came to the palace to give the king his haircut. And so the king warned him, "Mark my words, you are the only person in the whole kingdom who knows about my bone horn. If anyone else gets to know, it would only mean that you betrayed my trust. And if that happened, you will be sentenced to death." The poor barber was terrified. He swore that he would not tell anyone. However, as time went by, the barber started feeling a strong urge to tell. He could not bear to keep such a big secret all to himself. But what could he ever do? Finally, he found a solution. He went deep into the woods, where no one could hear him, and started to dig out a big hole. He climbed down inside it, and when he was certain that no one was around, he began crying out loud, "The king has a horn on his head, he has a bone! The king has a horn on his head, he has a bone!" He kept repeating the same words until he was exhausted. At last, he felt released from the burden of keeping the secret all to himself. He filled up the hole and went back home. Winter came along, and on the patch of soil where the barber had dug the hole grew a bunch of wild wheat. Children began cutting the wheat to make reeds. But to their surprise, when they blew into them, the reeds began to sing the barber's song. "The king has a horn on his head, he has a bone." Well, the children were so amused that they went into the city prancing to the tune of their reeds. But when the king heard the news, he was furious and immediately sent for the barber. The poor barber was terrified and swore that he had not told anyone. But when the king threatened to chop off his head, the barber confessed the whole story about the hole in the woods. The old wise king learned his lesson well. Because if you truly want to conceal a secret, you must not tell anyone. If just one single person gets to know, it is no longer a kept secret. The king also realized that he had nothing to be ashamed of, and he decided to go out in the balcony and face his kingdom without a crown. And so he did. Can you guess what happened next? As the king was on the palace balcony, the bone horn on his head shrunk and disappeared. Spin, spin the bobbin. Once upon a time, there was a poor man who lived together with his wife in a small cottage. He worked as a weaver, spinning cotton around the bottle. This earned him very little money, and as he worked all day, he sang a simple tune. Spin, spin the bottom from the cradle to the coffin. The king used to stroll past the cottage for his daily walk, and each time he would hear the weaver moan the same old song. Spin, spin the bobbin from the cradle to the coffin. One day, the king decided to surprise the poor man. And as soon as he was back at the palace, he sent for his cook and ordered, "Roast me a chicken and stuff it with gold coins. Once it's ready, send it to the poor weaver who lives in the small cottage at the far end of the city." The cook obeyed the king's orders and sent the roasted chicken stuffed with gold coins to the weaver. The poor man and his wife were astonished when they received the royal gift. And the weaver's wife turned to her husband and said, "There's more food than we can ever eat. Let us slice a small portion and send the rest to our landlord, the baron." So the weaver and his wife sent the rest of the chicken away and did not find out about the hidden treasure. The baron was delighted to discover that the chicken was stuffed with gold coins. He was very greedy and kept it all to himself. The next day, the king walked by the small cottage, and to his surprise, the weaver was still singing the same song. Spin, spin the bobbin from the cradle to the coffin. Back to the palace. The king sent for his cook and ordered him to roast a big fat rooster, stuff it with gold coins, and send it to the poor weaver. But the same thing happened. The weaver and his wife kept a small portion to themselves and sent off the rest to their landlord, the baron. The king was very puzzled when the next day the weaver was still singing the same song. Spin, spin the bobbin from the cradle to the coffin. So once again he sent for his cook and told him to roast a large turkey, stuff it with gold coins, and send it to the weaver. But even this time round, the baron kept all the money to himself. The poor man never discovered the gold coins. When the next day the king heard the weaver singing the same old song, he decided to inquire about the chicken, the rooster, and the turkey. The weaver told him the whole story, and the king realized why the poor man was still moaning and singing the same song. "Very well," said the king, "climb up into my carriage." The weaver climbed up, and the king took him to his royal estate. "All this land, as far as the eye can see, belongs to me. Pick up a stone and throw it as far as you can. The land from where you stand till where the stone falls will be yours." The poor man could hardly believe his luck. He picked up a stone and began spinning his arm in circles, round and round and round. But the stone slipped from his grasp, shot up into the sky, landed straight on his head, and the poor man fell down dead. And as the king looked over the poor weaver, he heard the same song buzzing in his head. Spin, spin the bobbin from the cradle to the coffin. Jahan and the statue. Now, Jahan's mother felt exasperated watching her lazy son shuffling around the house wasting time. So, she bought him a roll of linen, set him up with a hand-driven cart, and told him, "Jahan, let us see if you're able to sell this roll of linen. You will make good use of your time and earn some money. But listen to me, do not bother selling to anyone who's too talkative." Jahan liked the idea, and instead of pushing the cart around the village, yelling, "Linen! Who wants to buy my linen?" Women began showing up on their doorsteps, calling him to attract attention. "Come on over, Jahan, come on over." But Jahan still had his mother's words buzzing in his head and said to himself, "These women are so talkative, I will not sell them anything." And many people gathered around him to inquire the price, but Jahan refused to sell and simply kept pushing the cart forward. On and on and on he went until Jahan left the village and came to a town. And right in the middle of the town square was a statue of a woman with a bobbing head, signaling the direction of the wind. The statue would lower its head when the wind blew south and tilt backwards when the wind blew north. Now, on that particular day, there was a south wind blowing, and when Jahan saw the statue bobbing its head, he thought she was calling him. "Is it me you want, madam?" he asked. The statue kept tilting its head forward, and Jahan pushed his cart towards her, thinking, "I like this customer. She doesn't say a single word." And when he arrived beneath the statue, Jahan told her, "Would you like to buy a yard of my linen, madam?" "Yes. Tell me, how much do you need?" The statue kept lowering its head, seemingly approving all of his requests. Jahan was extremely pleased. "I has an idea," he exclaimed. "Why don't you buy the entire roll, eh? Look, here you go. I am going to place the entire roll of linen at your feet, all right? Good. Now, when will you pay me?" "No worries. How about I come back for my money tomorrow, eh?" Jahan agreed that he would collect his money the next day. But when he arrived home and related the whole story to his mother, she immediately sensed there was something fishy. Yet it never crossed her mind that Jahan would sell the linen to a statue. So the following day, Jahan woke up early to go and collect his money. But that day, a north wind was blowing, and as soon as he arrived, Jahan saw the statue tilting its head backwards in a negating manner. And the roll of linen was no longer there. "Hey, madam, I came for my money," Jahan told her. "Don't you remember me? Yesterday I sold you the linen." "What do you mean by no? And today you were supposed to pay me, huh?" No, you don't intend to pay up. You'd better stop saying no or I'll stone you." Now when he saw the statue stubbornly tilting its head back, Jahan began hurling stones with all his might. And one of the stones landed on the statue's head, shattering it to bits. And to Jahan's surprise, gold coins started spilling out of the statue's head. "Now I see," yelled Jahan. "That's where you were hiding my money, oosh." Jahan was right, because no one knew that the statue was packed with gold coins. But the king was soon notified, and he sent for Jahan. But when he heard the story, the king said, "Since you made the discovery, the coins belong to you. We will use some of the money to repair the statue, but the rest is yours." Jahan managed to strike a better deal selling his linen to a statue rather than to people. The Giant and the Shoemaker. Once there was a shoemaker who earned his living by traveling from one village to the next mending shoes. The villagers always paid him for his service. However, if they hadn't enough money, they would give him some cottage cheese or a basket of fruit. Sometimes a small animal or even a bird. And every morning he would make his way to the village with a bag full of tools and a small pouch of food. And in order to get to the village faster, the shoemaker would often cut across the woods. The villagers used to avoid the woods because they believed there lived the giant ogre who devoured humans. These village rulers did not really bother the shoemaker, and he kept using the woods in order to reach his various destinations. But one evening, as the shoemaker was on his way back home, he came face to face with the evil giant.
Hey, you! Yes, you human!
Exclaimed the giant. Oh, how do you do, my friend? Answered the shoemaker politely.
What are you capable of doing?
Asked the giant. Well, I'm capable of doing all that you can do, answered the shoemaker confidently and without the slightest fear. The ogre could not suppress his laughter when he heard this puny shoemaker declare that he was as strong as a giant.
We'll see about that,
Challenged the giant.
Look, are you capable of doing this?
The giant picked up a stone from the ground and crashed it to powder with his fist. That's easy, smiled the shoemaker. And without letting the giant notice, he reached into his pouch and snatched a piece of cottage cheese. Then he bent to the ground, pretending to pick up a stone. Watch this. And he squashed the soft cheese until drops of water trickled down his fist. The giant was ever so astonished because although he was very strong, he was not so smart.
Dear me, thought the giant, I have never seen anyone throw water out of a stone.
But he did not give up, for he could not accept such a defeat.
Okay, now let us see if you can throw a stone as far as I can,
boasted the giant. And he picked up another stone from the ground and flung it so hard that it reached the trees at the very, very far end of the woods. Oh, I can do better than that, smiled the shoemaker. And once again, he reached deep inside his pouch where earlier on he had placed a small bird given to him by one of the villagers. He pretended to pick up another stone from the ground and tossed the bird into the air. The bird was finally set free, and he flew far, far away until he disappeared into the sky. The defeated giant gave up, and without uttering another word, went back home sulking. And when the giant related the whole story to his mummy, she was very suspicious of the shoemaker. Beware the human, she warned him, because he is smart, and if you're not careful, he will destroy you. But the giant did not pay any attention to his mother's warning, and the next day he set out looking for the shoemaker again.
Hey! Hey, you human!
Greeted the giant as he spotted the shoemaker.
I can uproot an entire tree with my bare hands.
And so the giant clasped his arms around a tree trunk and pulled it out of the ground, exposing its roots. The shoemaker did not appear surprised. So he took out a rope from his basket and started tying up all the trees.
What are you doing?
Exclaimed the giant, utterly confused. Well, I'm going to pull down all the trees in the woods. answered the shoemaker.
No, 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 hold it, hold it, hold it. Leave everything as is, yelled the giant. Because if you do that, I won't have anywhere to live.
And once again, the giant was defeated and had to go back home sulking. And every time his mummy would warn him, beware the human, because he is smart and he will destroy you. At long last, the giant decided to get rid of the shoemaker before it was too late. So the next time they met, the giant asked him,
Hey, you human, where do you live?
Oh, I'll show you, answered the shoemaker. And after a good walk along the meadow, the shoemaker showed him a small cottage. Here's where I live, explained the shoemaker. The giant took one good look and off he went. That evening, the shoemaker climbed up a tree next to his cottage and hid in its branches. But at midnight, he saw the giant approaching, carrying a huge boulder. The giant lifted the boulder and dropped it down heavily, crashing the cottage beneath it. Satisfied, the giant ogre went back home. But the next day, the giant came face to face with the shoemaker.
How can this be? Exclaimed the giant. Didn't you feel anything last night?
Yeah, to tell you the truth, I did feel something, the shoemaker said. Probably a little plaster came off the ceiling and fell on my face while I was asleep. Yeah. The giant was very puzzled and lost for words. He could not accept the fact that this tiny human being was stronger than him.
Okay, do you see that rock?
Said the giant, showing him a huge boulder.
Are you? Are you capable of lifting it on your shoulder?
I can do better than that, laughed the shoemaker. And all of a sudden, the shoemaker shot to the edge of the cliffs and started yelling, "All you villagers, get out of your homes, please. Leave your houses at once."
Dear me, whatever are you going to do?
Asked the giant, totally confused. Well, you see, I'm going to lift up that mountain there and drop it on that village there.
No, don't you dare,
yelled the giant, because he concluded that if the shoemaker demolished the whole village, he would not have any more humans to devour. And on the thought of food, he came up with an idea.
Very well,
said the giant.
You might have defeated me in strength, but you will never beat me in food, for I can surely eat more than you can.
Then let's have lunch together and we'll see, answered the shoemaker. So, tell me, what would you like to eat?
Ravioli,
answered the giant. Very well. Tomorrow we shall have a meal of ravioli, said the shoemaker. The next day, the giant showed up with 2 large cauldrons and 2 sacks full of ravioli. They lit a fire and began to cook the ravioli. But the shoemaker had a plan, you see. He prepared a leather pouch and secured it around his belly, well hidden beneath his shirt. And at noon, the food was ready, and they began to eat. The giant gobbled the ravioli by the dozen. With every 12 ravioli the giant ate, the shoemaker would only eat one and sneak the rest into his pouch. And at last, they ate it all.
I ate more than you,
stated the giant, who was completely stuffed with ravioli. Oh, get over yourself, protested the shoemaker. Didn't you see how much I ate?
No. I ate more ravioli than you,
yelled the giant. Well, very well, answered the shoemaker. Then let us count them.
Count them, frowned the giant. How can we count the ravioli if they're inside our belly?
Of course we can, said the shoemaker. It's easy. Look. And with a sharp knife, he sliced open the leather pouch. And all the ravioli spilled to the ground. The giant wanted to show off too, and he snatched the knife from the shoemaker and plunged it with all his might into his belly. The giant ogre fell down dead, and never more did he devour either ravioli or humans again.